Now we'll get to a little Seahawks because as great as that was on Saturday, it's a hell of a win on Sunday for the Seahawks. And joining us right now, as they do every Monday, to talk a little Seahawks, it is Tim Booth and Curtis Crabtree. It's the HawksNest Roundtable. It's proudly brought to you by Georgetown Brewery, locally owned and operated by two diehard Husky fans. How do you feel today, Manny and Roger? Huh? How's that beer taste? I tell you, the beer for me tasted perfect on Saturday night. Locally owned and operated. Again, they've been pouring the best local craft beer for the past 23 years. Makers of Manny's Pale Ale, Bodie's Zaffa IPA, and a host of your other favorite brews. Tap room is open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Visit them online at georgetownbeer.com. Tim, Curtis, how are you? Everything good?
Everything's good for me, yeah.
Tim, how are you?
I figured this was a continuation of the Cougar postgame show.
Well, we could, if we could. I could spend about another hour on it if you guys would like.
Hey,
it was.
Have you broken down the decision to call 4th and 1 speed option to the boundary on 4th and goal from the 1?
I was hoping at some point, Tim, during the Seahawks game, I think it was their first 4th down play, right? The only time they went for it on 4th down. I said, Geno Smith speed option. I mean, give it a try. You never know what could happen. It may work. I'd rather have Geno Smith doing a speed option than Will Rogers. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I think that would probably be a much wiser decision than to go with the a little bit more cumbersome quarterback running that play. My God.
They get a victory yesterday. I kind of wanted to get just your opening thoughts on what you guys saw yesterday. Curtis, let me start first with you. It didn't look pretty at times. It could be an ugly game, but they grinded out a win. And any team will tell you it doesn't matter how you do it as long as you just get a win. And they're 2-0, and they beat, which might be a better team than people realize by the end of the year.
Yeah, I thought that Patriots team did a lot of things well. Like, they have their deficiencies. They have a low ceiling on what I think they are as a team. But they played a good football game yesterday. And to go on the road and get a victory when you have some things not going totally your way, a running game that was completely non-existent without Ken Walker available for them. They needed, a few key guys to have big performances, and Geno Smith was the biggest one of them by far to play as well as he did to kind of carry the day for them. Defense had its ups, had its downs. The receivers were great for the most part. And yeah, to start the season 2-0, this is what you thought they needed to do. To have the kind of season you thought that they were maybe capable of, they needed to come out of the gate with a 2-0 start. Now they get a game against Miami this week where Tua's not even going to play, more than likely. I'm going to assume he's not. And that's going to lead to some, maybe a chance to go 3-0 out of the gate. So a very nice start to the season for the Seahawks in a lot of ways.
Tim, what was your takeaway from yesterday's game?
Well, I think we saw some regression from the defense based on kind of what we'd seen in week 1, and that's probably to be expected. Teams have tape on you now. They have a little bit better understanding of what you're trying to do on that side of the ball. I thought the tackling took a step back yesterday, kind of how good we felt it was against Denver. It wasn't quite as sharp or crisp as it was yesterday against the Patriots. It's kind of been the long bugaboo of the Seahawks is giving up massive games to tight ends, and here's Hunter Henry with like 15 catches in the first half or whatever his final number ended up being. But the trade-off to that was the Patriots had almost absolutely nothing from their wide receivers. I think until late in the fourth quarter, they had 2 catches from wide receivers, and both of them were by Jalen Polk. So I think defensively, you felt like they did what they needed to do. Stevenson didn't have a huge game. Brissett was Brissett. Offensively, yeah, as Curtis said, there was no semblance of a run game. And I think a lot of that had to do with some issues on the offensive line. I think we also had a little bit of more of appreciation of what Ken Walker can do coming out of yesterday. And that's not meant to be a knock on Zach Charbonnet. They're different styles of runners, but Walker's ability to make some guys miss when the blocking isn't there. I think that kind of his absence in that ability kind of stood out yesterday. And then at the end of the day, Geno Smith was spectacular. I mean, he was absolutely spectacular yesterday. And the numbers, I don't think the numbers fully do it justice, because you take out those, or you put back in those 5 drops. We're talking about maybe like a 38 for 43 day, which is just a mind-boggling number to put up as a passer, and not everything being dink and dunk down the field, but actually pushing the ball down the field at times. So they got a spectacular performance from their quarterback yesterday, and that allowed them the ability to grind out a win like that on the road.
Curtis, what's just stood out to me about the offense's performance, and just to piggyback on what Tim said about Geno Smith, the play calling there from Ryan Grubb, and I just cite one number, and that's 30, and that's the combined targets between DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba. It just felt like you have an offensive coordinator who has decided to let's get the ball to our best playmakers, and it's just something that from an offensive coordinator perspective feels like to me has been missing for many, many years with this team.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday's game certainly played in that fashion. I mean, if you look a week ago against Denver, they didn't have as many of those opportunities just with the way that the game kind of went. And so I still think it will be something that's a little bit hit and miss. And I mean, they're still struggling to get like the number of plays in a game to truly let their offense get more opportunities to do stuff as well. They had 60 plays, I think, week 1, 66 plays this week. So it's not like they're putting up 74 plays and really getting a chance to see the offense do, a ton of stuff with just the volume of plays that they have. And so for them to be as efficient as they ended up being in the passing game with those numbers kind of being where they are, I think speaks to, again, how good Geno was yesterday. And, it's one of the things that I wrote in my post-game takeaways about this game yesterday is, I mean, it's getting a lot harder for Geno haters to kind of have ground to stand on. Like, he's putting up really good performances, and there's a lot of sample size. He's a pretty good quarterback. And yesterday's game was just another one of those examples that goes to the pretty high end of the scale for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's always looking for the next quarterback, to replace him. And again, one thing, at least from, that comment, Tim, is I don't think it's unfair to say they don't have the future at quarterback, because they don't. I mean, he's old. They do need to find somebody eventually to where maybe he can groom them, or just they need a future at that position. But in this offense, with his skill set, there's all the talent in the world with Geno Smith. I mean, there really is. Right, Tim? There's not a throw that he can't make on the football field.
No, not at all. I mean, he is one of the best deep ball throwers in the league, without question. His accuracy when he has the time to set his feet is among the best in the league. Like, he doesn't necessarily miss. I've overheard kind of some conversations coaches have had this during training camp and during the offseason program, and I think Geno has surprised some of the coaches coming in with how good his accuracy is. Like, he's better in person than he is on tape, and that's kind of a refrain I've heard a couple of times from coaches during the offseason program. So yes, to your point, you don't necessarily have the future here because you don't necessarily want to invest your future in a guy who's 34 right now, but appreciate what you have in the moment. I think that's kind of the thing the fans should look at right now, is appreciate the fact that you have a guy who was sort of left for dead in the NFL universe, who has come back and now has really, I think, in this offense, an opportunity to thrive in a way that we didn't see the first 2 years that he was the full-time starter here. That first year was the transition year. And anything that he did that was, slightly good was deemed this incredible accomplishment because no one had seen him play for so long and everyone had the memories of where he was back when he was in New York. The second year, I think you saw some growing pains, not only with with Geno kind of figuring out the league starting to figure out Geno a little bit, but then also the limitations of maybe the offense and what Shane Waldron was running and what Pete Carroll wanted that offense to be. And now you have an offensive coordinator who, it has the ability to make those adjustments kind of mid-game on the fly and say, okay, the run game's crap today. We can't get anything blocked. Okay, Geno, go win us the game. And he called a game that allowed Geno to do that. And so I think from a fan perspective of, yes, you always want to project to the future, and okay, is it Jalen Milroe or is it, some other college quarterback right now? Hey, that's the guy we got to go get, and he can be our future quarterback. That's fine. but appreciate the fact that you have a pretty damn good quarterback right now who 2 games into the season has played pretty well.
Curtis, the one thing that we'll talk about every week and throughout the season is just going to be the play of the offensive line. I mean, there was times they looked better than they did in week 1. You tell me, why was that the case? There's probably some elements of play calling and decision making there by Geno. They didn't run the ball particularly, but they didn't run the ball at all. So that's a knock against them. There still were some struggles overall, but their play. Did you see them improve from week 1 to week 2? If you did, maybe you didn't. What would you attribute that to?
I think they were probably better in pass protection than they were in week 1, but the run game just wasn't there. And as Tim kind of alluded to earlier, last week, Ken Walker was able to make that extra unblocked guy miss and get something out of a few of those runs, including the touchdown run. I mean, Stone Forsythe completely whiffed on the second level, and Walker's able to get around him and get to the outside and get a touchdown out of that play. Zach Charbonnet got nothing extra yesterday when it came to on his running plays. He did on the last third down conversion on the pass that he caught out on the edge, which is a big play for them. But in the running game, he was not able to generate anything beyond what was blocked for him. And that was, I think, part of when it comes to the running game, that was a part of the issue as well. Sometimes the running back needs to do that, but they've had their struggles for sure, and that's going to be something they're going to need to clean up as things progress here. And they need to find some sort of a solution for it at some point. I do think there is still reason to give them some latitude, given Connor Williams working into the middle and Bradford having his leg rolled up the first week, and a couple of those things adding to the mix as well. But eventually they're going to need to have that unit kind of coalesce together and be something a little bit more than we've seen through 2 weeks.
What we make of it, Tim, you brought this up. It did stand out during the game was their tackling was so good in week 1. I mean, and everyone said the same thing. Everybody praised their tackling. Against the Patriots, it wasn't as sharp as it was in week 1. They gave up I got to look at the stat. How many yards did they give up on the ground? I mean, it was 185 yards on the ground. I mean, that's 36 carries when they were pretty one-dimensional what they were going to do. And then the thing that was maddening during the game is how many times did they have Jacoby Brissett wrapped up and ready to sack him? Then they couldn't bring him down. The guy was like Ben Roethlisberger back there. But that was one of the storyline was so great in week 1 was the tackling and all of that. How sure it was. Week 2 seems like they took a step back.
You think a defensive coach will like to have some film to chew his defense's ass on about coming out of a victory? That's probably Mike McDonald in a weird way is probably loving the fact that they maybe took a step back in some of those areas from where they were week 1. The running backs were better. Antonio Gibson was a starter in Washington at one time. Stevenson is kind of a bigger physical guy, a difficult guy to bring down. So I think you chalk a little bit up to that. The Patriots offensive line, I think, is better than what the Broncos offensive line is. So you add that in there. But I think it was just, you just have those days where you're not fundamentally sound. And I think that was a little bit of what it was yesterday. Just guys weren't necessarily breaking down and getting guys down to the ground the same way that you saw in week 1. I thought they were more aggressive in week 1 too. And that could be a factor of playing at home. You've got that crowd, you've got the throwbacks, you've got the debut, you have all that excitement and energy coming out week 1. That defense played like its hair was on fire in the opener, and yesterday it was a little bit more reactive. It was a little bit more kind of on its heels and having to react to what the Patriots were doing, which is not the way that you want to play, long term to have the best success on that side of the ball. And then to your point about the Brissett, that dude's a veteran. He's not a small quarterback either. He's got some size and stature to him. But yeah, I mean, Boye Mafe it felt like he could have had 5 sacks yesterday. Easily.
Byron Murphy was right there for a couple of them too.
Yeah. What did Murphy end up? Did PFF have Murphy as the highest rated, in terms of pressures?
I'd have to double check and look, but you felt him for sure. He was definitely, had an impact on that game, and he ended up with his first half sack, I guess, in the game with the one there with Leonard Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Williams was everywhere early on. I mean, they were Tim. They were there. That just was like you thought he was coming down, and then all of a sudden, Brissett, or as my son called him the entire game, Brisket, for some reason, they had him sacked. It just felt like the entire game, and they just couldn't bring him down.
But you got to you in the grand scheme of what you're hoping to get out of your pass rush. I mean, you're pleased with that aspect of it. You collapsed the pocket around him. You made it uncomfortable. You made him have to check it down a lot of times. Again, it goes back to Hunter Henry having this monster game, in part because there was no opportunity for them really to push the ball downfield between the pressure that he was facing and the coverage that was being played in the secondary. Now, of course, you don't want the tight end to have, however many catches it was that Henry had, but in the bigger picture, yeah, I think you got what you wanted out of the pass rush. You just didn't finish the play once you got there.
Hey, Curtis, we're gonna talk about the competition at right guard probably a lot, between Anthony Bradford and Christian Haynes. I mean, I said it yesterday. I've seen the last of I don't need to see Anthony Bradford anymore. But the problem with that is if Haynes was so much better, he'd be in there, right? I mean, the coaches, they see it, they watch it. But we don't talk a lot about the left guard competition. Can there be any competition for Tomlinson at all?
Well, that would be a Christian Haynes, Anthony Bradford decision.
Okay. So whoever loses that out goes over there?
Exactly. So, it's the same collection of players you're pulling that from, same pool you're going to pull from. So, I mean, the biggest thing with Anthony Bradford is I haven't completely hated the way he's played, but he's got to be on record for pace for the number of penalty calls he's had through 2 weeks of the season. Every time it's penalty on the offense, number 75. It's okay, man, you got to stop holding guys and whatever else he's been called for already this season, because it seems like just about every time they have something called on the offense, it's on Anthony Bradford. So they have to get that cleaned up for sure.
Yeah. It's just the solutions there, because they Tim, they've rotated a lot with Bradford and Haynes, and they did that yesterday. And then I think the natural reaction is, well, what about Tomlinson? Can they get somebody to end up rotating with him? I mean, but again, this will be a storyline that we'll talk about throughout the season, just based on these guys' play, because through the first 2 weeks, right, it just hasn't been all that good.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's the it's the lack of depth, it's the lack of options there. I mean, as Curtis said, you have 3 guys for 2 spots. It's not like you have 5 guys that you could rotate in or give an opportunity to along the way. I've always and they're kind of a makeshift line right now anyway, as it is, with Fant out and Stone Forsythe in there. I thought Haynes played better yesterday than he did in the when he got his little bit of run in the opener. So I do think that's going to be an ongoing thing, is throwing. I mean, you drafted him that high for a reason. He was projected to be, a pretty NFL ready offensive guard coming out of UConn. That I think you're going to see more of him getting that run in there. I don't know if it's necessarily going to trickle down to floating over to the left side and replacing Tomlinson, unless there's an injury concern or reason behind it. I think, as much as you're concerned about how Tomlinson has looked the first 2 weeks, there is something to be said about having some continuity on that side, protecting Geno's blind side and especially with how well Charles Cross has looked the first 2 weeks. So, but yeah, I think you'll see a little bit more Christian Haynes coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Hey, late in the game when they ended up getting the tying field goal, before they made that decision, what was your guys? What did you think they were going to do, Tim? Did you think they were going to kick it? You think they were going to try and draw them off sides, which what they were trying to do, or were you an advocate like myself to go for it there?
Well,
I mean, obviously it worked out well for them, but
I was looking at my play call sheet and I was going, do we go speed option to the boundary, or do we go
do it again,
or do we go fake handoff reverse pitch like the Apple Cup last year to DK coming around the backside? I think I would have been fine either way. I thought initially they were going to go for it, because how often at Washington did we see Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb go for it in that kind of situation and just sort of put the hammer down and try and put the game away in that moment? So my gut feeling was they were going to go for it, but I was fine with the decision to go to overtime. Because you kind of felt like the momentum was on your side. Get the game to overtime and see what you can do. And obviously, it worked out perfect with getting the stop on the first series. So I think I would have been fine either way. But I mean, how you can not choose speed option into the boundary on 4th and 1? I don't know.
He's never going to recover from that play. I don't care what Jetfish does. Curtis. He's never going to get over that play ever in his tenure as the head coach of Washington. And I'm here for it, and I support it.
This is why me and Tim like being Central grads, because we can call both schools out when they do stupid stuff. And like right now, UW's got to wear that one, because that was not that was not pretty this weekend for sure. Like of all the calls I thought they were going to make in that circumstance, I did not have that one in my back pocket, thinking that one was what they were going to go to.
What did you think that they were going to do? I mean, did you think they were going to try and go for it there in regulation?
I didn't. I thought it was purely just to try to get him to jump. And I mean, maybe if you come up there and, they've left the B gap open or something, you can make you can make the decision to snap it and try to have Geno dive through it or something. But like, I thought it was going to be like, I think you'd make those decisions, particularly early in the season, like when you're concerned that you're not the better team, like you're trying to chase a win and get something and steal something from an opponent. I think the longer a game was going to play out, it was probably going to end up being in Seattle's favor more often than not. Seattle's offense, I certainly would take over New England's when all was said and done. So you tie that game up and hope that you can get the one stop you need to give your chance an offense. You either get it on the coin toss or you give yourself a one stop to give your offense a chance to win it in overtime with a field goal. So I thought that I certainly wasn't shocked that that's the route that they went.
You know what, Curtis, too? It's shaping up perfect for them right now. You got the injury to Tua, so they get Miami here at home. They're favorites in that one. One would think that with Skylar Thompson playing quarterback, they should get that victory. And then they get the Lions Monday Night Football, which will be a test, obviously. And then you get the Giants before you face San Francisco on Thursday Night Football here at home. I mean, they've got a great opportunity, Curtis, to be 4-1 before they play San Francisco.
Yeah, and a San Francisco team that may not have Christian McCaffrey back yet and just lost to Minnesota yesterday. So, we're still learning things here early in the season about, everybody in the division, including the Rams, who apparently still can't figure out where Marvin Harrison's lined up to cover him in that game. So, yeah, I mean, it's the schedule. When we saw it come out back in the spring, like it was very much there's a soft landing for Mike McDonald's opening couple games with Denver and New England. You wanted them to be able to get those coming out of the gate. Now, because of the injury to Tua, Miami has softened a whole heck of a lot from what you thought, plus the way that they played through the first 2 weeks as well. So there is that opportunity there, and the Giants are as bad as we thought the Giants were. There is a chance to really kind of get ahead of the game here early on for the inevitable growing pains that I think you expect will come for this team at some point throughout the season. If you can do it from playing, ahead in the standings a little bit, it certainly helps their case a lot for making the playoffs and being the team they want to be by the end of the year.
God, and I watched I didn't see the full game, but the highlights of what Arizona, and looking back at the box score, what Arizona was able to do to the Rams yesterday. Jesus.
As good as Geno was yesterday, Kyler was. I mean, that's the kind of game you don't see very often. Like, take away the fact that he had a perfect passer rating, but just the shots that they were able to take on that Rams defense and the way they played. Everyone kind of thought Arizona was sort of the team that was going to surprise a little bit this year. I shouldn't say everyone, but there was a lot of people who felt like they were a team that was on the rise. And through 2 weeks, or at least yesterday, and how they played in the opener too in Buffalo, they definitely look like a team that's vastly improved. And so that's not the gimme games it has been for the division the last couple of seasons, at least right now.
And who would have thought that you lose the best defensive lineman of a generation and a team in the Rams gets worse? Who could have seen that coming? Like, it's almost as if Aaron Donald was pretty good, and them not replacing him with somebody like him is going to be a problem for them. In addition to the injuries to Cooper Kupp and to Puka Nacua. So,
Tim, it's a small sample size, 2 weeks. What has stood out to you about a Mike McDonald led Seahawks team?
They don't panic. I thought that was something yesterday. It didn't feel like there was any point in the game where there was any panic from the coaches or the players. And I think that's a sense of how calm and sort of controlled he's super analytical in how he thinks. So I think that resonates with his players. So I thought that was something that stood out yesterday was, they're not playing great at times. They have no run game. The defense is getting gashed a little bit. It didn't feel like there was any, it was very process oriented, process driven. And I think that resulted in a calm demeanor that allowed them to play, pretty well there in the fourth quarter and then get what they needed done in overtime. So that's something that's kind of stood out the first 2 weeks. I think the defense is going to be a little bit more along the lines of what we saw week 1 than what we saw week 2. At least that should be the hope. Because if it is, I think the defense has a chance to be pretty good overall. And, I go back to Geno. I think, Geno is Geno's damn good. I guess that's the best way to say it. And when you have a system that allows him to take advantage of the skill guys that he has in the way that they did yesterday, to your point, Puck, 30 targets between JSN and DK. That might not be that's probably not going to be the breakdown every week. It might be 10 to DK, 8 to JSN, and 8 to Tyler, because Tyler was really not involved in things in the pass game yesterday. But whatever that is, they looked at it and said, we're going to get the ball to our best guys, period. And we're going to force feed it if we have to in certain situations and make sure that they are involved in whether we win or lose this game. And I think that's another thing that stood out, just the understanding and realization of, okay, these guys have to have the ball. And that's something that I think we've never really felt that way the last few years with Shane Waldron's offense. That it's a priority with this group.
Curtis, if you're Geno's agent, you call Schneider back up again. Hey, do you guys want to talk? I mean, we're open to doing anything right now if you'd like. I mean, we could squeeze something out right now. What do you say? Come on, Schneider. How about a little extra cash?
I think if you're Geno's agent, you have faith that your guy's going to put up about 9 or 10 more of those sort of performances this year, and then you're going to be in a really nice place come the offseason. So, because, the Seahawks don't like to negotiate contracts with 2 years left on the deal. I don't see them answering that phone call, so to speak, at any point during the year as it is. So, but like you keep doing what you did on Sunday, it'll be a very nice place for the Smith camp to be at the end of the year for sure.
Yeah. No, he was so damn good. He was, the numbers, I think he was something like 14 of 17, damn near 200 yards when they were trailing. He was great. He just really, really was just phenomenal yesterday. And it was just fun to watch. And Curtis, as we wrap up, and Tim, I agree with you. I don't think they're going to have games where those two have 30 targets. I guess what I just liked about it yesterday was they knew they couldn't run the football. They had to win a different way. They had to win with passing the football. I just think under Waldron and other guys that they've had in the past, they would have still tried to run the football, or they wouldn't have adjusted. And I think Grubb, we saw it in week 1, him adjust, to what type of running plays they called or different schemes that they did. And I think they went into this game and then he's like, all right, we can't run it. Let's just target these guys. And, Smith's got it going, and so does JSN, and so does DK. Let's go. And they kept going. The other thing, too, I liked, maybe Waldron did this. I don't know. There was 2 different occasions yesterday during the game that I can recall where it was 3rd and 15 or 3rd and 18. I swear to God, in the past, they would have run a draw or something. And just not try to get it. And I don't think they even got the 3rd down conversions. But you know what they did? They tried. They tried to pick up the 18 yards on first, to get the first down. I just like that. I like that. Let's be aggressive and not sit back and, run Max Strong up the middle.
Well, there was a sense of a stubbornness in the past among the offensive coordinators here. And some of that had to do with the fact that Pete was kind of had an influence on what their philosophy was on how they approach things. This group, Mike McDonald wants to know what's going on, but he's busy trying to figure out what the hell the defense is going to do.
Right.
The next time they're out there. Ryan Grubb is in some ways has this weird amount of autonomy for a first-time offensive coordinator in the NFL to sort of do whatever he wants to do. And if what he wants to do says, we can't run the damn ball today, okay, we're just going to throw it 30 times in the second half or whatever the number was. That's what they're going to do. And he showed that adaptability at Washington under a head coach who was far more flexible and was very involved in what the offense was going to be like. And I think that's carried over to what we've seen the first 2 weeks with the Seahawks.
There it is. It's the HawksNest Roundtable with Curtis Crabtree and Tim Booth. It's all brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. They have been pouring the best local craft beer for the past 23 years. Manny's Pale Ale, Bodie's Off, a host of your other favorite beers, Lucille, Rogers, all of it. Tap room is open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Go visit them at georgetownbeer.com. In fact, click on that, take a picture of that QR code if you're watching the stream right now, and you will be taken right to georgetownbeer.com. You can watch the replay of this again on YouTube, listen to it, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts, and, of course, at pucksports.com.